apparently good vibrations just aren't for the Beach Boys. If you want to have some fun, here's some suggestions that you can get in on this fun. So here's 3 suggestions. Number 1, keep a daily journal of 3 things you're grateful for. This works really well if you do it first thing in the morning or at evening before you go to bed. Number 2, tell a spouse, partner, or a friend something that you appreciate about them every day. Number 3, just look yourself in the mirror and tell yourself something that you did well or something that you appreciate about yourself. Gratitude can help us not only conquer, but deal with some of the most unimaginable circumstances. Alice Herz-Stomer, who died recently, spent 2 years in a Nazi concentration camp. While most of her relatives had escaped Prague before the Nazi occupation, Alice and her husband stayed behind to take care of her aged mother. Eventually, the whole family is interned in the concentration camp. Alice's husband and mother died in the camp. Alice, at the beginning of the war, she was just embarking on a promising concert pianist career. Because of that, she was required to play in concert for the officers and the visiting dignitaries at the camp. Alice knew that if she didn't play well, she and her son would die. She also taught her son to laugh, because she knew that if he could laugh in spite of their dire situation, that he could survive. Her primary goal became keeping her son alive. Of the thousands of children that entered the camp, only a few hundred survived. Alice's son was one of who survived. Alice credited her survival with an attitude of gratitude that she maintained not only in the concentration camp, but also throughout her life. She believed that complaining changes nothing, and that life is a gift for which to be grateful. Alice chose to be grateful, and that choice saved her life and also the life of her son. So the first 2 keys are: remember who you are, choose hope, and be grateful. These are keys that can help your children and their families. So once again, I found myself in the spring of 2004 by Cindy's bedside. Well, once again, we talked about the do not resuscitate order. Hospice was suggested, but Cindy had 2 cruises to go on, one to Alaska and one to Europe. And I knew the hospice would not be needed anytime soon. Recently, I had talked about these 3 keys with an MS support group, and a guy raised his hand. He said, well, one of the keys to Cindy's remarkable life is the fact that you're her caregiver. I didn't quite get it, but what he said was, you seem totally engaged in her care, totally engaged in this process of being a caregiver. And I reflected upon it, I actually really am. I really enjoy seeing Cindy happy, and I really enjoy this process of helping Cindy have a remarkable life. And I think by trying to be normal, just trying to be normal, that we have achieved a remarkable life. I can't emphasize the importance of a caregiver to you today enough. Because if you think about it, the key to your success in the services that you provide for your kids is the caregiver. You leave the house. You've made some suggestions. You've made some recommendation. But who is responsible to take those recommendations and do something with them? It's the caregiver. It's the parents. Without their help, nothing's going to happen. So the relationship you have with the caregiver is probably at least as important as the one you have with the kids, or maybe even more, because they are the ones who implement what you say. Without hope, without giving them hope, they're not going to do what you ask them to do, because they have to see that what you're saying is giving them hope. It gives them the opportunity to have a better life. They have to feel that you're on their team. Let me tell you about another phone call. Hello? Can I talk to Cindy? Cindy doesn't talk on the phone because it's really hard for people to understand her. This is Brad. I'm her caregiver. Can I help you? I know who you are. This is Denise from the cardiovascular lab. I just want to talk to Cindy. As I said, she doesn't talk on the phone. Can I help you? I just want to talk to Cindy. Well, actually, Cindy's in the hospital. You can't talk to her anyway. Okay, then I'll just go see her in the hospital. So later on, I go to the hospital, and I ask the nurses, was somebody from the cardiovascular lab here today? They didn't know. They go to the nurses station. Nobody knew. I asked Cindy, was Denise from the cardiovascular lab here today? Cindy was sick. She wouldn't remember. Jane, her caregiver, had been there that day. I asked Jane, was somebody there from the cardiovascular lab today? Didn't know. The next day, I finally found somebody who tracked down Denise to find out what Denise had done and why if she'd actually made the visit. They come to find out that Denise had been there and she had adjusted Cindy's defibrillator. Well, not only did I feel disrespected, but I felt like she hadn't respected Cindy as a patient, because Cindy was sick and unaware of what she was doing. And so, needless to say, Denise is no longer on Cindy's care team. Your parents need to know that you are on their team. That's the only way you'll be successful as a provider. So just last Monday, a week ago today, Cindy and I celebrated our 44th wedding anniversary. And I was reminded again that at 42 to 44 years we've been together, MS has been a not-so-silent partner in our marriage. You know, for a long time, I just took care of Cindy because that's just what you do. When a loved one has something like this, you do the best you can. But, you know, when I think about it, probably my story is not that unique. There's probably a lot of folks who are doing the exact same thing. In a survey conducted by the Pew Research Group, there we go, nearly half of the adults surveyed said they expect to care for an elderly parent or relative at some point. Half. All right. So here's some other statistics that you might find interesting. You all have a flyer on your table. Have one of these. So if I could have everybody look at if everybody has a flyer. If you have a red X on your flyer, would you please stand up? Okay, so these are our caregivers. These are the people who are caregivers in the room today. 4 out of 10 adults in the United States today provide some kind of care for a family member or relative. So of our caregivers, 50% of these caregivers get no help from family, get no unpaid help from family or friends. 25% have been in this role for 5 years or longer. Thank you. So here's another one. If I could get this table of ladies to stand up. Interestingly enough, gender plays a role in caregiving. Women who are diagnosed with a chronic disease are 7 times more likely to be abandoned by their spouse than men. That equates to about 20%. So we'll have you two remain standing, everybody else sit down. Everybody else went home to their spouse. These two, they got no one. Sorry, go ahead and sit down. So let's do a little survey. If you have been, or if you are a caregiver presently, I imagine there's some in the room. Would you please stand up? So these people really extend themselves on the behalf of their loved ones. So would you please join with me in giving them a round of applause? Thank you. So I'd like to just take a moment to introduce my buddy here. This is Caregiver Bear. Caregiver Bear is here to remind us that caregivers have big hearts. These are the people that take care of your kids. They have big hearts. So once again, I just want to validate them and those of you who are caregivers today and express my appreciation on behalf of those they care for their valiant efforts in their behalf. So as I said, I identified 5 keys that have enabled me to find a sense of joy and fulfillment in my personal role as caregiver. The first one is simply make the choice. About half of the U.S. population has at least one chronic condition. People 65 and older are expected to make up 19% of the population by the year 2030. Of these people, many will have chronic conditions. That 30% is up from 12% in the year 2000. So whether we like it or not, many of us will be faced with the situation of either being a caregiver or being the caregiver being cared for, whether we choose it or not. Something that we feel compelled to do as opposed to something we choose to do rarely produces a sense of self-fulfillment. Self-fulfillment comes when we actively choose to do something and actively participate in the process. My youngest son found this out firsthand in the summer before his sophomore year in high school. Josh has always loved basketball. Go figure. He was tall, had the genes for it. At a relatively young age, he developed a pretty good jump shot. Well, for years, Josh was able to get along with his size and his jump shot. But as he got into junior high, I noticed that he wasn't nearly as successful as he had been. That was due in part to the fact that he was a little bit slow. He was just a little bit clumsy on his feet. So I thought it would be a good idea for Josh to start to run in order to build some speed and agility. Well, so I suggested it to Josh. Being 15, he just wasn't buying it. But one of my patients happened to be the cross-country coach at the high school. So I talked to Joe, and Joe concurred that Josh would benefit by running. So he said that the cross-country team was about ready to start to work out, so he encouraged me to get Josh to come run with the cross-country team. So I went to talk to Josh. By telling Josh that it would improve his basketball skills, I was able to get him to run. Well, the cross-country team would run around the streets around the high school, and then midway through the run, every time they would run up to one of the hills close to the high school, and there Josh, right on schedule, would throw up. He did this for the first several weeks. It was really a struggle for Josh. You know, I was pretty proud of Josh for the efforts that he was making, and he continued to run. So I asked Josh, how's it going? Josh said, you know, I'm going to do this, but I'm not going to run in any of the meets. So, school year starts. Joe somehow convinced Josh that he ought to run in a race for sophomores and freshmen. So Josh decides he'll run in the race. And he runs in the race, and surprise, surprise, he's not the last man on the course. He actually was kind of just an average runner. After that, things started to change for Josh. In fact, cross-country became a major part of his high school career. What changed for Josh was the cross-country became the end rather than the means to an end. He actively participated in the process of running cross-country. Something that we feel compelled to do rarely brings a sense of self-fulfillment and joy. This life lesson was reinforced in my own personal life, oddly enough, in the middle of a lake while being dragged by a boat. I always knew that I would love to water ski. Growing up around the lakes and reservoirs in southeastern Idaho, I knew about the sport, but life on a farm really didn't afford me the opportunity to experience it firsthand. Well, you can imagine my delight years later when I found out that Cindy's family were water skiers and they actually had a boat. Cindy's brothers took me out water skiing a couple times, and I was hooked. So I really enjoyed it, but unfortunately, we were headed off to the Midwest so I could go to dental school. As soon as we were able, we bought a family boat. One evening, not long after we bought the boat, I invited our friend Bob to go water skiing with us. Well, Bob shows up with his own personal slalom water ski. Now, showing up with your own personal water ski when you get invited boating is somewhat similar to me showing up at the neighborhood pool party with just my Speedo. It really builds expectations. It raises the bar really, really high. Well, unfortunately, Bob really didn't need to bring his water ski. His skill level didn't match that need. But I had a vision. I was no longer going to double ski. And up to that point, what I would do is I'd get up on 2 skis, drop a ski, and then somebody'd have to throw a life jacket over the side, and then we'd have to go back and retrieve the ski. I wasn't doing that anymore. That was no longer an option. I was going to learn to slalom ski. So I went to the local ski shop and talked to my friend Don. And Don gave me some tips. Using Don's tips, I was able to get up first try. Well, as I skied along, I soon found myself outside of the wake. Now, to a novice skier, the wake seems pretty insurmountable. I don't know why. It's not that big. But anyway, if you approach the wake timidly, you get caught in the little trough of water out here on the side. In order to get across the wake, you have to commit. You have to decide you're going to cross the wake, absorb the impact with your knees, and you'll be fine. So, if you want to enjoy water skiing, you have to make that choice. You can either be dragged around by the boat, or you can commit and cross the wake. Once you cross the wake, the whole lake becomes your playground. For me, there's nothing more fulfilling than being on the lake on a warm summer day with my family. So, something that you feel compelled to do, rather something that you choose to do, rarely produces any sense of self-fulfillment. As I said, for years, I took care of Cindy just because that's what you do. In a lot of ways, I was a victim of MS also. So, everything changed one day when Cindy was in the hospital and she was desperate to go home. And I had an epiphany. I could do this. I could take care of Cindy at home. When I did that, everything changed. I made the commitment. The nursing home option was no longer an option. Now caregiving was something I wanted to do, something I had chosen to do, something I was happy to do. I feel blessed to be able to do it. It gives me a lot of joy and satisfaction in being caregivers. And you know what? I'm no longer the victim. I'm in charge. My water skiing experience taught me that with education and planning, the challenges can be mitigated. And so it is with caregiving. It comes with its own challenges, such as physical and mental strain, the enormous amount of time that you spend doing that. But as with water skiing, with education, those challenges can be mitigated. Once I chose to be Cindy's caregiver, the possibilities have become limitless. Making the choice to provide care for a loved one can be one of the most precious gifts that you can give them. And I found real fulfillment in doing that. So perhaps the most important key in being a caregiver is, number one, make the choice. Number two is choose you, create a balanced life. Caregiving is not for sissies, actually. Even though when you go water skiing, you choose to cross the wake, you still have to deal with the challenges. So it is with caregiving. Even though you make that choice, you still have to deal with the challenges. According to the Caregiver Alliance, caregivers frequently fail to consider their own personal needs. Caregivers are less likely than non-caregivers to practice preventive health care and self-care behaviors. They are prone to sleep deprivation, poor eating habits, failure to exercise, failure to stay in bed when ill, postponement or failure to make medical appointments for themselves. Family caregivers are at an increased risk of depression, excessive alcohol, tobacco, and drug use. And, caregiving is, on one hand, you feel really good about what you're doing for your family member. But on the other hand, caring for your family members can bring about exhaustion, worry, depleted resources, and stress from the continuous care demands. Caregivers are more likely than non-caregivers to have chronic illness such as high cholesterol, high blood pressure, and a tendency to be overweight. Studies show that an estimated 46 to 59% of caregivers are clinically depressed. 46 to 59%. So as you look at your parents that you're dealing with, some of those parents are depressed. You need to take that into account. You can't stop the impact of a chronic or progressive illness or debilitating injury on someone you care for, but there's a lot you can do to take responsibility for your own personal well-being and meet your own needs. Choosing to meet your own needs first will enable you to take better care of your loved ones. Not only do we need to take care of ourselves physically, we need to make sure that we meet our own emotional and mental needs. It's like they say on an airplane, put your oxygen mask on yourself first, and then put it on your loved one. The wisdom of choosing me became apparent early in my decision to be Cindy's caregiver. When the physical demands of taking care of Cindy got more strenuous, I decided I needed to be more committed to go to the gym and work and maintain my body. Well, at first, this increased commitment kind of caused a little strife in our marriage. Cindy thought I was overdoing it, but I persevered. After several discussions, Cindy realized that her physical well-being and the quality of her life were directly related to my ability to take care of her. So resentment turned into support. She's now appreciative of what I can do for her. As Cindy's physical abilities deteriorated, I felt overwhelmed at times. Fortunately, I was able to find a good counselor. I could go to the counselor and talk through my problems and find solutions. I found that a third set of eyes, which is what some of you can be, someone with no vested interest, was really helpful to me. So I highly recommend that if people are struggling, that they seek out professional advice or find a good support group where they can find some help and guidance. One particular problem that I was having was when I would present a problem, when I would want to go do something with Cindy, like go to a movie or go on vacation, she never seemed to have an opinion. And I felt like I was kind of losing my wife because she wasn't all that interested in doing things. My counselor helped me understand that what Cindy saw was the barriers. If I said, let's go to a movie, she saw all the barriers that were involved and all the obstacles that were involved in getting to the movie or going on vacation. So what he helped me understand I needed to do was I needed to work out all the barriers first. Then when I present Cindy the plan, I could present it to her as something that she could do. Now Cindy's pretty much game. When I say let's go do something, she knows that I worked out the barriers and she knows that we can probably do it. So when I retired 9 years ago, it was really great. But after about a year, I started to miss the social interaction of patients and the staff. And so I was able to find this little part-time gig that's enabled me to fulfill my personal and social needs. I used to feel a little bit guilty when I wanted to take time for myself. My counselor helped me understand that recreation is important part of your life. Recreation is an important part of the lives of these families, of the parents of the children you work with. Encourage them to get recreation. Now I make a point to get out once in a while and just relax and do some things that I enjoy doing that perhaps Cindy can't. Things are going along pretty well until we had a little incident that took place that kind of threatened our equilibrium here. I'm a dog guy. I've always been a dog guy. I just like the companionship of a dog. Well, for years, we had a little lap dog named Kizzy. Kizzy was a great dog. But, you know, look at me. I'm a big guy. I need a big dog. So I would always talk to Cindy about getting this big dog. And Cindy would always counter with, I'm the one that's home all day long. I'm the one that's going to have to take care of the dog. So you can't have a big dog until you retire. Well, in 2007, I retired. I thought this would be my chance. But by then, Kizzy was really kind of old. So Cindy's next line of defense was, Kizzy's too old to have to adapt to another dog. So, all right, she was old. But knowing that she's old, you know, sooner or later she is going to die, and she did. And not that I love Kizzy, but she was old and I didn't want a big dog. Anyway, so I had my opportunity. This was going to be my chance. So I dispelled all Cindy's arguments. In fact, I convinced Cindy that what we needed was a service dog. It would be a really good benefit for her if she had a service dog. So we came to Portland, we visited the trainer of service dogs, and after discussing it with the trainer, what we really decided we wanted was just a companion dog, just for Brad, just a companion dog, and a medium-sized dog rather than a big dog. So when I got Scooter, I knew I had a lot riding on this poor dog. So I read up, and I read several books, and the one thing they said was dogs need exercise at least twice a day. So I committed that I was going to walk Scooter in the morning and at night. Well, not long after we got Scooter, I started to work again. So the morning walk had to be done a little bit quicker, so I started to jog. And I've never been much of a runner, but oddly enough, I really got so I liked it. And so sometimes I would be running at night. Well, I've always really admired people who could run a marathon. I've always thought that was the coolest thing in the world. Have somebody have the tenacity and the drive to train and run a marathon. I was kind of wondering. I started to wonder because I was liking running. I wondered if I could run a marathon. Well, a couple of years ago, I turned 65. So I decided to celebrate this milestone birthday by running a marathon. So 2013 began, and I decided that in the fall I would run the Portland Marathon. So I started to run a little bit extra. Well, things were going along pretty much okay on schedule till one morning in the middle of January, I got up at 4:30 like I normally did to take Scooter out for a run. And I got up and it was cold and icy. And I'm kind of OCD, and I was going to do my run. So I went up, I got on my neighbor's driveway and fell down. I got up, I was okay, and most people would turn around and go home, but not me. I walked over to the lawn of the neighbors and got on the lawn, and it was okay. And then I made my way back up to my route, which was along the road. And if I ran on the gravel on the side of the road, that had traction, so I made my way, and I was almost completed my run when I needed to cross the road. And when I went across the road, I had a little too much confidence, and I slipped again. This time when I looked down at my right leg, my right foot was over there. My leg was down there. So there I was, 4:45 in the morning, at the end of a blind turn on an icy road, in the middle of the icy road, in the dark, without a cell phone. How am I going to get out of this? And then I heard, "Hey, mister, are you okay?" Nope, I just broke my leg. Well, a good Samaritan who had seen me run past made his way down the hill, called 911 for me, waited while the ambulance showed up, and then he took Scooter home to wait so somebody could go pick him up. Later, he told me that as he saw me run by, he thought to himself, that guy's going to break his leg. Well, as you can imagine, this was a major, major issue for Cindy and I as a caregiver. We had always depended on my 2 good legs. Now we had 1. Now, if you don't remember anything else I say to you today, remember this. 1 leg for 2 people does not work. The ratio to leg to body needs to be at least 2 to 2. 1 to 2 does not work. Well, so we ended up having to get rides and deal with this and just get through, but we actually did make it through. It was a real struggle, but we did make it through. So now I realize that when I'm choosing to take care of me, I'm choosing to take care of us. And as caregivers, we need to take care of ourselves first, and things will go better. Not only does caregiving cause physical stress, it also causes some stress on our marriages. You can imagine when couples anticipate the birth of their child, they're not anticipating a developmentally delayed child. They're anticipating a healthy baby. So a recent study was cited in the Chicago Tribune, and this was about the impact of a healthy baby on a couple. Well, you can imagine what someone with some challenges can do for your couples. Anyway, the Gotham Research Group and Institute did this study, and they said relationships suffer for about 2 out of 3 couples within the first 3 years of having a marriage. Most couples regularly respond to the needs of their children first, neglecting their partners. As time goes on, the relationship balance can continue to unravel. It's a common challenge every couple is challenged with. How do I cover my bases with my life and my partner with the new child? The basis of any strong relationship is a good, strong friendship, which involves feeling appreciated and turning to one another for help. This is something I found particularly interesting. There's extra pressure for parents to spend more time with their kids today. Working and stay-at-home mothers spend more than 14 hours a week with their children, and that's in comparison with only 10 in 2065. In 1965, they spent 10 hours with their children. In 2010, they averaged 14, which really surprised me with the number of working moms and all the stuff that goes on. It really surprised me that they're spending more time with their children than they did in 1965. So you need to be aware of the stresses that your children play on the marriages of their parents. They can be better caregivers if they work together. As your service providers, you need to remember that and try and encourage them to do what they need to do to keep their marriages strong. So my first 2 keys are make the choice, choose you, create a balanced life. And the third one is share the load. Another challenge of the caregiving is the enormous amount of time and energy that is spent taking care of your loved one. I've been reluctant to ask for help, and most caregivers are. We don't want to burden those around us. We want to feel like that we can do things ourselves and we can take care of this. But help can come from a variety of resources. Community resources, family, friends, and professionals. Encourage your families. Don't wait. Ask for help when they need it. Don't wait until they're overwhelmed or exhausted or their help's failing. Reach out for help. It's actually a sign of personal strength when you do. So shortly after Cindy and I got married, we moved across the country so that I could go to dental school. Consequently, we became quite independent. When I got out of dental school, we moved back west, and we didn't settle close to our families, partly because we just valued our independence. So, but with the busy dental practice, 4 active sons, and civic involvement, and the added complication of Cindy's deteriorating health, I found myself in the counselor's office trying to sort out my life. My life kind of reminded me of a an incident I had seen at a local salad bar. One savvy lady, in order to get the most out of the one trip option, had decided that she would line her plate with crackers, thus increasing the size of her plate. Well, it worked pretty well for her, but my crackers were falling off. You know, I wasn't able to pull off. So I found myself again in the counselor's office. I needed some help. So I talked to the counselor, and what he helped me understand was that I didn't have to be a one-man circus. I needed to be the ringmaster. That there's lots of rings in this circus, and I just needed to be the ringmaster. Being the ringmaster meant that I was no less responsible for Cindy's health and well-being, but I just didn't have to do everything myself. There are certain things I don't delegate. For example, I'm the one, if she's dealing with a wound, I'm the one who saw the wound yesterday and the day before, and I'm the one who will see it today. I'm the one who can monitor that. Sometimes when we've had community health come in and do stuff like that, you get a different nurse every day. And so that nurse who's here today didn't know what it looked like yesterday. So certain things I have to be in charge of in conjunction with your healthcare providers. Fortunately, I found some support. Not long after we moved to right before we moved to the Northwest, Cindy had given birth to our third son. Well, the one thing I thought I could do is I didn't have a lot of time myself, but one thing I thought I could do was help her with the house cleaning. And so I happened to be in the office one day, and a lady said that she and her sister cleaned houses. Well, I ended up hiring her sister, and Carolyn has been a part of our lives for 37 years. As MS took more of Cindy's independence, sometimes we asked for help, and sometimes people just volunteered. When our youngest son, Josh, was about ready to go to preschool, we decided that Cindy just wasn't up to doing that. We had a couple of friends who realized that, and they volunteered, and they came and picked up Josh every day so that he could go to preschool. We were truly blessed in our lives, and Cindy was able to do most of the things that most mothers do for their children, like getting them up, making the after-school snacks, taking them to practice, going to their games. And she was able to drive pretty much until our youngest son got his license. But at that point, we decided that she really shouldn't drive anymore, so Josh became his mother's chauffeur. As Cindy became more unsteady and began to fall more often, I became acutely aware that she needed more help. I was in the middle of checking out the local service agencies when I happened to go into Home Depot one day and run into some friends. And they asked what I had been doing, and I said, well, I was out checking out some service agencies to get some more help for my wife. And one of these friends happened to say, I used to do that in California. In fact, my kids are older and I'm thinking of getting into it. Because of that chance conversation at Home Depot, Jane has been Cindy's caregiver and, more importantly, her friend for over 10 years. Cindy's life wouldn't be nearly as rich or rewarding or remarkable hadn't it been if it wouldn't have been for Jane. And actually, folks, help can come from a variety of resources, a dental chair, or even Home Depot. Help doesn't always come in a physical presence. Our second oldest son moved his family from Chicago to Seattle in part so that he could be more help to us. While they're not really involved in our daily life, having them around when we have a health crisis really means a lot to us, and their support is really useful. Sometimes what we need most is just emotional support and the reassurance that someone is around when we need it. So don't try and go it alone. Help your families to share the load. So the first three keys are make the choice, choose you, create a balanced life, share the load. And the next one is to cut yourself some slack. Perhaps one of the challenges of caregiving that would surprise most caregivers most is the amount of guilt that caregivers feel. You're always second guessing yourself. You know, did I do that right? Did I do enough? Could I have done more? If I would have done this with the person I'm caring for, would they be better off? But the actual truth is I didn't give Cindy MS. There's really nothing that I did to do it, and there's nothing I can do to take it away. I have no reason to feel guilt for that. Taking care of your loved one at home creates a certain amount of risk. In his book, Being Mortal, Dr. Atul Gawande a noted surgeon, public health researcher, and writer, addresses the state of elder care in society. He says, while most caregivers put a high premium on safety, those being cared for look at life from a different perspective. Dr. Gwandi says, our most cruel failure in how we treat the sick and the aged is the failure to recognize that they have priorities beyond merely being safe and living longer. That the chance to shape one life story is essential to sustain the meaning of life. So by providing those we care for with the chance to write their own story, such as Daniel Kish, who wanted to explore the world as a blind boy, he broke teeth, he broke bones. But by doing that, he has a greater life than he would have if his mother would have protected him and made sure that he was safe. So by allowing people we care for the opportunity to write their own story does create some risk. For example, one day I was helping Cindy get ready for a doctor appointment. I was just doing the regular stuff I do to help her get dressed and stuff, but I heard a loud pop. So I looked around, I felt her legs, I felt her hip, I felt no broken bone. So we just went about our lives for the next couple of days. Then a couple of days later, I was helping Cindy get ready to go someplace, and I noticed that her right knee was a little bit swollen. So we took a trip to the doctor, and she indeed had a slight fracture of her bone. Well, I could have felt really guilty about it. But the actual truth is, providing Cindy an environment where she can write her own story, one that's safe, relatively safe, loving, and one who has her best interest at heart. Cindy and I took it as just as a minor speed bump rather than a major detour. Things will happen. Things are going to happen when we give people the opportunity to write their own story. So I was talking one day with a friend of mine. I was talking to him a little bit about these presentations I do about caregiving and how I really enjoy it. The guy says, well, you don't walk on water, do you? It's like, no, I don't walk on water. I fall a lot. But by allowing yourself to sink, you'll learn to swim. You know, if you don't try, you'll never learn to swim. So I do the best I can. And I try not to beat myself up. There's lots of turmoil, there's lots of strife in everybody's relationships. In our marriage is a give and take. Sometimes there's hurt feelings, and sometimes there's a reason to apologize. But by trying to by trying to control our guilt, we're more healthy, we're able to help out our loved ones more than if we feel guilt-ridden. Nobody wants to be around somebody who feels guilt-ridden. If you have a positive attitude, you're going to provide much better care. So, our choices so far. Make the choice, cross the weight, choose you, create a balanced life, share the load, cut yourself some slack. The next one is dare to dream, cross the weight, and make the rooster tail. So back to Christopher Reeve. Christopher Reeve says, so many of our dreams at first seem impossible. Then they seem insurmountable, improbable. And then, when we summon the will, they soon become inevitable. As a caregiver, many of us feel that we have to put our own dreams on hold, that we have to postpone our dreams. Joel Brown, an internet entrepreneur, explained the importance of dreams. He said, dreams are the things most of us know we need when we are working towards success, but somewhere along the way have forgotten why it's so important that we follow them through. Then he lists a bunch of reasons, and 3 of them are particularly important for caregivers, and for your parents or your kids. The secret of living is giving. If we follow our dreams, then we have something worth sharing with others. Hope, inspiration, and the meaning of life. Number 2, dreams distract us from the negative events in life. We will weigh up what's most important, our dreams or the drama. Drama seems obsolete when we are passionate about following our dreams. Believe me, in all our lives, there's plenty of drama. We don't need to focus on that. Number 3, The more we chase and accomplish our dreams, the more the boundaries the world puts in front of us will fade. We learn that anything and everything is possible. The recent movie, Eddie the Eagle, is based on the life story of Michael Eddie Edwards, who captured the attention of the world in the 1988 Montreal Winter Olympics. Eddie had been a moderately successful downhill skier. In fact, he barely missed making the 1984 British downhill team. But in order to increase his likelihood of achieving his Olympic dream, he decided to switch to ski jumping because he knew there was no British ski jumpers at the time, so he had a pretty good chance of making the team. He just had to qualify. Well, because there was no team, there was no sponsorship, so he was self-funded. He moved to Lake Placid, New York, to train. Because he didn't have a sponsor, he ended up having to borrow equipment. He was bigger than any of the typical ski jumpers, and if you notice he's wearing glasses. He was so farsighted that he had to wear his glasses when he jumped, which would always fog up. But Eddie captured the attention of the world. When he made it down the hill, he would do like an eagle dance, and the fans loved him, and the press ate it up. He became the darling of the 1988 Olympics because he was following his dream. He became a symbol of the Olympic spirit. Now, I doubt anybody here in the room, well, maybe, but I doubt there's probably going to be anybody in the room who is going to have a Hollywood film company come and want to film our lives and make our life stories a major Hollywood film. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't follow our dream. So anyway, as I mentioned, was I was sitting on those, out in the middle of the hayfield on those hot summer days in Idaho, what I was dreaming about was water skiing. What I really wanted to do was make the big rooster tails that you see when people water ski. So after I learned to cross the lake, I found with some major falls, some broken ribs, I found that if I carved the ski on the back with adequate speed, leaning into the turn, I was able to make some pretty big rooster tails. Rooster tails on a calm summer, on a calm lake in the Northwest on a summer day, to me, that's what dreams are made of. So rooster tails on the lake were a personal dream for me. Another dream of mine sprouted out of my interest of the business aspect of dentistry. So local business leaders would come in and they would talk about how they were going to Seattle to get their MBA degrees. And I was a little bit envious. But with 4 active sons, a wife who was dealing with MS, a practice that was a real busy practice, I knew that getting an MBA was just not possible for me. But some years later, I happened to be going home to fix Cindy lunch one day, and I heard an advertisement for George Fox University here in Portland about a professional track MBA program. Well, that advertisement ignited an old dream. And I decided, after talking to Cindy and Cindy's caregiver, I decided that I was going to apply. So people and friends, my friends would say, well, what in the world are you doing that at your age, spending that kind of money, I mean, really, at your age, spending that kind of money, that kind of effort to get an MBA degree? Well, my vision was fixed. Here I was, a 58-year-old man. I was using my brain in ways that I hadn't used it for years. I was able to experience the enthusiasm of people half my age at the beginning of their careers. And it was the most exhilarating thing I had ever done. So at age 60, I was able to celebrate my accomplishment by receiving my MBA. In the audience that day was my son Jamie, who 2 months later would get his MBA. So Jamie and I were able to complete MBA programs practically simultaneously. That's a rooster tail. During that process, I learned business theories that I had done that explained why some things I had done in my practice didn't work and why some of them did. I was able to really use that as a great experience. So now, let's go back to my broken leg story. So having one leg between the two doesn't work. I had to get rides, and we had to get help with some of the silly little things. But anyway, we did learn to adapt. I had the choice. I could get a cast from my mid-thigh to my foot, or I could have surgery. So I opted for surgery, and by that they put a rod in my leg, and so I just had to wear a little walking cast that I could take off and shower and stuff like that. My son found a device that would transfer the gas pedal over to the left foot, so I was able to drive. And I sit when I work, so I really didn't miss that many days of work. So after about 4 months, the walking cast came off, and I was back having to walk scooter twice a day. And as I did that, pretty soon I started to run a little bit. Well, later that fall, obviously I wasn't going to do the marathon, but my son and I, Jamie, completed the 100-mile MS bike ride later that fall. So that was a pretty good rooster tail. But I still had that question about the marathon on my mind. So I was running, so 2014 came along, and I did some research. I found the flattest marathon in the local area, which is the Vancouver Marathon, just in case you want to know. It's a good starter marathon. It's almost all flat. So I did my research, and I committed that I was going to run a marathon. So Scooter and I trained all spring, and on Father's Day, at age 66, I completed my first marathon. And I want to tell you, I did a personal best. Anyway, it was a rooster tail. All right. So either one of those dreams, getting the MBA or running the marathon, you'll notice in the story there was a setback, and I didn't get it on schedule. But, you know, I did it. And that's the way dreams are. For every gold medal runner, there was a bronze, there was a silver and a bronze, and there was somebody who didn't even get a medal. But still, the people who ran and did well, did their best, they had that rooster tail feeling. So anyway, let me tell you about another one. So, up in Morton, where I work, a guy comes in, and I ask him what he does for a living. He says he's a mountain guide, and he takes people up to the top of Mount Rainier. Well, so I just out of curiosity, I asked him, is something I could do? He says, sure, you can do that. I told him, you know, I'd ran a marathon, and he assured me that I could do it. So I kind of tossed it around in my mind for a while and thought, I wonder if I could really do this. I talked to one of my sons about it. So finally, earlier this year, I decided I was going to cross the wake. So I signed up. So I ran a lot. I rode my bike a lot. I walked around the neighborhood with a pack. But the one thing I didn't do, which proved to be my downfall, is I didn't get out and walk. I hiked. You know, I'd done some hiking years ago. I'd done some backpacking along the Pacific Crest Trail. I climbed Mount St. Helens, climbed Mount Adams once, but I hadn't done anything like that for years. But anyway, I was committed to do it. So a week ago Wednesday, so 10 days ago, my Mount Rainier adventure starts. So the first day we go in for orientation, and lo and behold, the guy that had talked to me in my dental office was my guide. So the first day you go and you just do orientation. The second day you go to do mountaineer training. And so what you had to do is you go to Paradise Lodge, and then you have to walk up to the snow. So this guy's walking along like this. And I'm thinking, this is a piece of cake. I can do this. Well, let me tell you, it's not a piece of cake. The next day, we're walking up to Camp Muir, which is 9 miles away at an elevation gain of 5,000 feet. This becomes pretty hard. That night, they wake us up at 11 o'clock at night because we're going to make our climb, our summit climb is going to be at night because of the heat. So, the summit climb is divided up into 4 segments. Each segment is an hour and a half long. Each segment is an elevation gain of about 1,200 to 1,500 feet. And And so it's about a 5-mile hike up, and then it's a 5-mile hike down, and then it's a 9-mile back to Camp Muir. And you're going to do that all that day. So we make the first segment through snow. It's okay. Second segment's through the rocks. And, you know, I kept tripping. And anyway, long story short, I decided that the summit of Mount Rainier would have to wait till 2017 while I made some hikes. But I made it up to 12,500 feet, which is higher than Mount Hood. So there you go. It's still worth it. We'll wait till 2017. I will make the summit. So, as caregivers, not only do we need to consider our own dreams, I think that we need to consider the dreams of those we care for. Cindy had always had a dream of going to Europe. I was not really that interested. In a couple of years, I decided, I'm going to make this happen. I better hurry because her health might not give out, might not hold out that much longer. So I figured out that a cruise would be the perfect way to take her. So one fall day in the fall of 2014, Cindy and I experienced Venice together. And I'll tell you, it was a rooster tail feeling. So to recap, remember who you are, choose hope, be grateful, make the choice across the way, choose you, create a balanced life, share the load, cut yourself some slack, dare to dream, cross the weight, and make the rooster tails. Over the years, the rooster tails have changed for Cindy and I. We sold the boat when the boys got older, and so passerbys in New York City last fall would probably just looked at us as any other couple. But as I looked at myself in the Jumbotron on Times Square, I had that same feeling that I got when I made those big rooster tails on the lake. Dr. Gwandi wrote, "You may not control life circumstances, but getting to be the author of your life means getting to control what you do with them." 44 years ago, MS was not in our plan. But by choosing to live normal, we managed to create a life that's been beyond normal, a life that has been quite remarkable. It doesn't mean that the wakes aren't really high. It doesn't mean that there's not challenges. It doesn't mean that we don't fall. It doesn't mean I'm going to make my dreams the first time every time. But many times when the wakes get really high and they seem really challenging, I'm reminded of the words of Marianne Williamson. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, and fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people will not feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It is not just in some of us. It is in everyone. And when we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give others permission to do the same. When we are liberated from our own fears, we automatically liberate others. So, we got the keys again. Your school year's starting. How are you going to use your keys? At the end of the year, are you going to look at these keys knowing that you've done everything you can to take them to your families and to your children? Or will you be looking at your keys at the bottom of the elevator shaft like I did? So, as we conclude, are there any questions, comments, or concerns that you would like to share? All right. Well, I'd just like to thank you for the opportunity of being here today. I'd like to thank Cami for the invitation. And now This is school. I'm going to give you a homework assignment. Are you ready? I'd like to invite you to make someone's day by doing a random act of kindness for one of the caregivers that you work with. It doesn't have to be a big thing. It can be small. Some of them are listed on your handout. Some little things that you can do. It could be like taking in them a plate of cookies, offering to do a little errand for them. It could be as simple as something that happened to me recently when a friend of ours just acknowledged me for the things that I do for Cindy. Or when a healthcare provider takes a moment to say, "How are you doing, Brad?" It could be as simple as that. Cindy and I recently had dinner at a local restaurant. When it came time for the check, the waitress said, "You don't have a check. Someone's paid it for you." Henry Farrell was the guy who rescued me that day when I broke my leg. Cindy's a member of a book club, and they have all the meetings at our house just to facilitate her attendance. So I would invite you, make someone's day. They'll appreciate it. And when you do it, you'll get that rooster tail feeling. Thank you.